Hi George, great to see you, and thanks for taking the opportunity to have a discussion today around how we're working together in digitising the Wheelhouse business and how technology plays into a lot of the decisions that a lot of companies in our sector are taking at the moment. Perhaps you can tell me a little bit more of your views of why technology is driving so many decisions in the asset management world.
I think it's one of those things where, the technology growth chart, if we visualized it, which is what we're probably going to talk about more, it's a vertical line. And so it's inevitable. Operational efficiency is obviously driving automation, which needs to come from technology, and data. The data that we need to make more constructive decisions is ever growing, the volume of it, what we do with it. And so the two combined really is pushing that growth curve up in technology usage, whether people want it to or not.
I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about data as we continue with the conversation.
Yes, we will. So as we're discussing, the drive and acceleration of technology in our sector is obviously rife right now. Is this why Wheelhouse have decided to partner with a technology firm?
So this is part of our transformation, having left the group that we were part of until 2 years ago. There were a number of things we needed to get in place first to make sure we had all the basics right, the information in the right place in order to take our business forward. And on that journey we've been on, we've discovered a number of things, particularly around data sources, the value you can drive out of putting different data sources together, and in terms of how we can remove some of the manual entry within our business to actually digitize and tech enable the performance of the duties we're undertaking for clients. Now is a really good time for us to be doing that. If we'd been tempted to do that a little bit earlier, I think we may well have gone down a route of buying something bright and shiny off the shelf, which I'm sure would have served reasonably good purposes. However, wouldn't actually give us the full benefit that we get from having taken our time, been out, talked to other service providers in the sector, talked to a number of clients about precisely what their current needs are and where they think their future needs might be, and also to really get an understanding of people's expectations around the customer experience and how that's developing.
I think there is a risk of being early adopters in the process, especially around data and automation, which is what you're trying to drive to do. So I think now is the right time. There's a lot of new products coming out. The Power Suite from Microsoft is enabling a lot of what we're doing together, which wasn't there already 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, I agree. Now is definitely the right time.
I'm constantly amazed at the valuable information that can be found out there publicly, be it publicly available information or subscription-based information. And the problem with a lot of it is that it has a certain amount of value, but there are bits missing. And where technology really comes into play here is the ability to use those tools that you're mentioning, George, to enhance one set of information with another set of information and drive out some really interesting findings that can certainly help with growth as well as how we deliver our services.
So I understand you're driving to improve your client's experience, be it end user experience or performance in terms of what they're getting for you from value. But I assume it's adding a lot of value to internal performance and systems at Wheelhouse as well.
Absolutely. So first of all, the data point, once more, it's driving an incredible amount of value in terms of helping us to identify opportunities at a time that people have needs. So certainly from a marketing and growth perspective, incredibly valuable. There are naturally efficiencies to be gained by taking manual processes and automating those processes. It means we don't have to deploy quite as much manual effort around quality assurance, which gives end users, clients, the comfort that what they're getting has been properly quality assured and potentially at a more attractive price point as well, which allows us to win in the marketplace.
I think the other thing that we have to consider as we're going through this journey is the evolution of products. As we were saying earlier, the sort of growth chart of technology is vertical. And I think part of the user experience that you're going to give to the clients will be, taking feedback about features and benefits and evolving the system as we go along. So the choice of products is obviously really important.
Oh, indeed, and there's been a lot of feedback taken along the journey already, and that will be a continuing part of the client experience, is us seeking feedback on how the systems perform, how the operations perform, what the user experience is, what else is in the pipeline for our clients that will drive further additions to, for example, the client portal that we'll be building together on the back end of the digitisation of the way we actually perform our services. So George, are we ahead of the curve at Wheelhouse in terms of our tech adoption, or are you seeing broadly similar patterns elsewhere?
In terms of what you're doing in your specific sector, you're definitely ahead of the curve. I think it's something that people have been talking about doing for a while, but it's so hard to put into action your ideas and thoughts and views on how you can automate and really turn firms like yours into technology firms in a way, that I think people have struggled to find the right partner, perhaps, or they've just struggled to get their ideas down in a way that actually is economic. I think that comes back to our point about what tools to use. There now are tools available to do this, but you still need the imagination and drive to do it, which you guys have.
I think that's really important. It's a combination of insight into, for example, data sources which are available, along with the insight of how you can actually deploy the latest technological tools in order to drive the most value. And one of the things that's really important for us is that forward-looking flexibility, both in terms of adapting for clients' new needs as we go forwards, but also making sure that we can update the underlying technology as we go, so that things are not, so that the entire system is future-proof.
Yeah. And I think using the tools that we can integrate together to produce the output is the critical thing, because if we develop something from scratch without using market tools that are available today, then we would have that problem. We'd constantly be having to go through refresh cycles, some of which might require a complete rebuild if the whole back end, doesn't get updated or isn't supported anymore by the original manufacturers. So that's absolutely right. I think going back to the point about what other people are doing, I think some of the larger firms have tried to do this or start to do this, but they're so big, it's like trying to turn an oil tanker on its axis, whereas you guys are quite flexible in your approach. But also it's going to be down to you and your team's experience and drive right now to try and get all of those components built while it's fresh in the head.
And there's something about the attitude that a smaller firm can take. It's not just the fact that you can turn the ship that much quicker, but you can actually, and we do encourage this within our business more broadly, we have a culture of failing fast. We like to try different things in a test environment, in a safe environment, in a risk-modified way. And if things work, then you do more of them. If things don't work quite, you tweak them. If things don't work at all, well, you stop doing them and you move on to the next project. So having that kind of agile mindset, I think, is quite important. And that's something we've only really developed our thinking on that by working with a firm such as yours, which deploys those kind of methodologies day in, day out. But I think it's really, really powerful to adopt that mindset, because it does enable you to make the mistakes quickly you're going to make, rather than on a £2 million project and only discover at the back end.
And when you're technology first and technology driven, you have to invest in R&D. And the R&D is not just testing stuff from a systems perspective, it's also the people's mindset, as you rightly said. We spend a lot of time as a firm doing, lessons learned sessions. And a lot of that is because we're trying new technology all the time, but the engineers need to feel comfortable enough to fail. There's no blame culture or anything like that, because then people don't even try. And I can see that you guys have the same approach.
Indeed, very, very important to us, and I know it is for you as well, to make sure that we're getting constant feedback on the user experience, the client experience, more broadly than just the tech side of things. We spend a lot of time with clients, with prospects, with fellow service providers to the industry, and with market specialists on, for example, our website development, to ensure that the user stroke client stroke customer experience at all stages is being fed back to us, and that we're in a cycle of continuous improvement based on the feedback we're hearing. So George, you mentioned this vertical. What's your view on where technology adoption within our industry is going? Are we going to reach a plateau fairly soon, or is this an onward trend?
It's definitely an onward trend, the vertical growth chart. I can't see it ever ending, and it's one of those exciting parts of working in technology because new things come out all the time. Basically, people taking their ideas, obviously, and producing something that benefits the sector. I think we're going to move in a continuous curve away from having infrastructure that needs to be maintained. Everyone's been talking about cloud for the last 6 or 7 years in an aggressive manner. But I think it's going to continue to become more about edge computing, which is what we've started talking about in the last year, where the actual device you're using becomes more ingrained into the technology platform. You know, mobile phones now, the latest iPhone is more powerful than some laptops. So it will become more about that mobility of people now that we've been kind of forced into this collaborative world from COVID. And so it will become more about the data and how we present it. I think, you know, we're talking today about the portal that we're doing together, which is crucial because it's going to give people that window into the data. It's just going to become more of that trend. We'll see more SaaS products coming out, and then it will be down to the providers, be it us, you, other people in the sector, integrating those SaaS platforms, but pooling the data together so people can make better decisions on what they're going to do. So talking about the portal specifically, what access does it give clients that they don't already have access to in terms of, you know, data and features and the components?
So I think there's a number of different answers to that, and one of the key benefits from having a portal like that is around the nature of the interaction that our client handlers and our delivery teams will be having directly with staff, with clients. It's not to say that they won't be having interactions, because the portal will be handling seamlessly the ingestion of data. Now that will be happening, and that is a benefit, but it does free up our people somewhat to spend more time considering in more detail the needs of the client, addressing them on more value add areas. So that's certainly one benefit that we see coming from this. Part of the vision here is that the entire range of our service offering will be made available to customers via the portal. But also we see this as developing into a broader platform, giving clients the ability to access other service providers with ancillary products that are, you know, complementary to what we're delivering and relevant to their needs.
So kind of like a marketplace.
Kind of like a marketplace, yeah. Very, very similar to, you know, an Amazon type concept.
But without socks.
But without socks. There's another angle to this as well, but with all the tech development that's happening at the back end and all the different types of data being ingested and the new techniques and ability to put those pieces of information together in interesting ways, I think there's real potential here for driving some value out of all that anonymized data and providing products to clients which will enable them to do some benchmarking, to consider their position versus peers, and so on. So that, you know, that would be accessed through the portal, but driven by the underlying technology that we've been developing together over the last 6 to 9 months.
I think for them to be able to see where they sit in the marketplace is crucial. And you're right, you know, we're going to be collecting all of this data. So anonymizing it and giving it back is definitely a good route to go down.
Absolutely, there's most definitely value there. Many of the discussions we have face-to-face with clients are around, what are my peers doing? Where do I sit within the grouping? What quartile am I in? Obviously, it's very important from the perspective of performance, but generally, you know, people want to understand, how are my colleagues in other firms dealing with the same sorts of issues that I'm facing, be they investor demands, be they performance, be they compliance, be they, you know, how I operate my business day to day. So having that information available and accessible on an anonymized basis, I think is really quite valuable.
Obviously, data security is very important. How are the clients going to access the portal?
Well, we've mentioned it already that you really, we need the portal to be a tool which is accessible via, you know, different mediums, be they mobile phones, be they laptops, be they desktops, whatever the different technologies people are using. And I think it's absolutely critical. I know you agree with me on this, George, that security is vital, and security needs to be at the right level, regardless of which platform you're using to access the portal or any of our services. It must be absolutely top-notch, and agnostic of the device you're using.
And there's a balance, isn't there? Because we've touched on user experience. You don't want to be in a scenario where you have to put in 5 different codes before you get access. So we're going to have to work hard to find the balance.
Indeed, and it will be constantly evolving. We see a lot of different approaches out there from banks and insurance companies, pension companies, so on and so forth. And yeah, the level of user satisfaction that I have as a user of those services varies tremendously. So it is a case of understanding the technologies which are available, seeing the ways that they've been deployed elsewhere, picking best of breed, and ultimately being prepared to make changes that will, on that constant feedback loop from the user experience and customer feedback, making sure that you're taking that into account. And we're getting the right balance between the user experience and the top-notch security that our clients expect. And partly that's driven by the fact that they operate in a regulated sector. Perhaps more significantly, it's down to the expectation of the investors in their funds and how they operate their businesses. And we see that feeding down through into service providers to regulated firms as well. And that will only continue.
Well, it's interesting because we're talking about where the sector's going. I mean, RFA are now going to be regulated in Luxembourg because I can see that this is the way it's going to go. If we as a provider have access to clients' data, it's the same as anyone else. So I think IT firms in general will become regulated in this sector. I'm trying to get ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you see as much as we do, George, that when we're receiving RFPs, there is generally going to be a IT DDQ associated with that, and we are held to the same standards that the regulators are holding our clients, the regulated firms, to. And very often, with the nature of the international clients that our firm services and your firm, RFA services, it's going to be the highest standard applicable across the entire regulatory environments, plural, that those firms work within. So be it SEC, SFC in Hong Kong, various European regulators, FCA, PRA, we have to apply the highest bar in all cases. So we've been working at Wheelhouse with your R&D team very closely, George, for quite a period now. Are you seeing a great deal more activity in this space in the market?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to say again, but the vertical growth chart means that there needs to be a trusted partner who can test the products, test the integration. And our R&D team kind of moves around teams at RFA all the time, so people get to test new products as well as keeping their hand in on the learning side. But it's really about making sure that we're working with partners in the sector, like Wheelhouse, but also with some of the other software providers to help build APIs. And as a sort of a peer group within the sector, we're always sharing ideas. But we've made a decision to invest quite heavily back into R&D to make sure that we're evolving. Because as thought leaders for the sector, we need to be able to know as much as we can about what's next. And this is the best way to do it. Try and test.
Sure. So in the various projects you're doing with us and of course with others, be they amongst our peer group, be they amongst the investment management community, there'll be learnings coming out of every project. And I'm interested to hear how you can leverage those learnings that you're making elsewhere, for example, when working with us.
Yeah, well, I think that, we've talked about the fact that Portal's going to evolve all the time. And I've been talking to you and your team about ideas that I've got for features that it can bring. And a lot of that comes from our experience with other projects. COVID's actually forced quite a few projects on us because we had to do things fast for the clients. From a basic standpoint, if you can imagine, we suddenly went from going to clients' offices to help them do things to having to go to their houses. So we actually had to very quickly build a track and trace app of our own to give to our clients so that if we had an engineer going to someone's house in the morning, we could trace whose house they went to next so that if anyone got COVID, we could notify, etc. That then evolved for when the larger firms were coming back, sort of 200 plus user firms, to the ability to use the app to book slots for lunch, or book a bike rack or a shower or things like that. So it's just the technology is evolving all the time. A lot of what we're doing on the PE side of our business is about automating deal flow. We use SharePoint quite heavily for that. But all of these elements are coming from feedback from our clients about what they need. So I'm envisaging all of this coming into a sort of collected ideas pot that we can look at each month together and work out which ones we think are going to add the most value, which ones can be quick wins for our clients, which ones we need more feedback on, and just evolve that together based on what we're hearing in the sector.
Very interesting.